Federal agents facing heat in Chicago tonight. What former cops say crossed the line.
Federal immigration agents coming under fire for aggressive tactics used to chase down suspects and quell protests.
Some former Chicago law enforcement officials say they are using tactics that the Chicago Police Department outlawed years ago because they were too dangerous. Political reporter Paris Schutz has the very latest.
Yeah, Dawn and Scott, we all saw the images yesterday of federal law enforcement agents sparking a tense situation on Chicago's east side when tear gas was deployed after protesters threw objects. Now, this came after a high-profile raid in the neighborhood and a high-speed vehicle chase down a residential neighborhood, kind of like this one, when officials used a controversial pit maneuver, again, this is file tape, to purposely crash into the side of a suspect's vehicle to force it to stop. Now, pit maneuvers have been outlawed by CPD here, as of other high-speed chase tactics, including boxing in, forcing a collision, ramming, and roadblocking. Sharon Fairley is a law professor at UChicago and former head of the agency now known as COPA. She says these high-risk policies were scrapped because innocent bystanders could get killed, and the risk to the community in a dense urban area is too great.
Where you don't have a highly significant law enforcement reason to be pursuing this person, if it's not like a really serious violent crime that someone's getting away, for example, then it's hard to have the balance with the significant risk that it represents to the public by racing through residential streets at these high speeds.
And former police superintendent Eddie Johnson says pit maneuvers are too dangerous for cops and the community at large. And he says high-speed chases like the one yesterday down a residential street should never occur.
What I saw yesterday, flying down residential neighborhoods, you know, you got to think about children being out there at that time, and their instinct for danger is not what an adult's is. So they may be chasing a ball, you know, out into the middle of the street and get hit inadvertently because of things of this nature.
Now, Johnson also says that CPD almost never resorted to tear gas or chemical munitions as crowd control because he says those inflame situations further as opposed to de-escalate.
I haven't seen tear gas really de-escalate anything. What it does is spread the crowd out, and then they come at you from other different angles. And then if you notice, what happens is when protesters start realizing you're going to use tear gas, they start bringing their own tear gas mask. So what's the point? You know, and then there's no such thing as a non-lethal munitions. If it's a munition, it's less lethal. So when you're using rubber bullets, let's say you have elderly people out there with a pacemaker and you don't hit the person you're aiming at and you hit that elderly person, you could kill that person. So I think they need to pare down what I see as no de-escalation tactics at all.
In a lengthy statement, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says ICE and CBP are trained to use the minimum amount of force necessary to resolve dangerous situations to prioritize the safety of the public and themselves. Our officers are highly trained in de-escalation tactics and regularly receive ongoing use of force training. Rioters and terrorists have opened fire on officers, throwing rocks, bottles, and fireworks at them, slashed the tires of vehicles, and have destroyed multiple vehicles. Others have chosen to ignore commands and have attempted to impede law enforcement and use vehicles as weapons against our officers. Despite these grave threats and dangerous situations, our law enforcement is put in the position where they show incredible restraint in exhausting all options before any kind of non-lethal force is used. And McLaughlin says there's an elevated threat level, alleged bounties on the heads of CBP leaders as reasons for why they mask themselves and have had to use some of these tactics. But Johnson says the key is better communication right now between CPD and ICE. We're going to get into this a little more on the Chicago Report tonight, Scott.
Looking forward to it, Paris. Thank you.